שידורי ישראל מירושלים, רשת א' וב', שלום רב וגמר חתימה טובה. השעה 3. דובר צה"ל מוסר כי סמוך לשעה 2 פתחו הכוחות המצריים והסוריים בהתקפה בסיני וברמת הגולן. בשל פעולות מטוסים סוריים בגזרת רמת הגולן נשמעות צפירות בכל רחבי הארץ, שהן עולות ויורדות. אלה הן צפירות אמת.
October 6, 1973, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Israel. At the peak of the Jewish holiest day of Yom Kippur, while people are fasting and gathering in synagogues across the country, a combined and surprising attack by Egypt in the south and Syria in the north dropped the Middle East and later the whole world into a chaos that will end up with the first and the largest oil crisis in world's history. Welcome to Economic Rhapsody, the channel that discovers history to understand the future. And today, I invite you to explore the dramatic global economic consequences of a relatively esoteric war between one tiny nation to its neighbors far away in the Middle East. So please subscribe to the channel to support us, and let's get started. October 1973 will forever be etched in the collective memory of Israel and the world. The surprise attack on Israel during the Yom Kippur War sent shockwaves through the region, triggering a series of events that would have far-reaching economic consequences on a global scale. As the war unfolded, 7 Arab countries, with Egypt and Syria at the forefront, aimed to reclaim territories lost to Israel in the Six-Day War of 1967. Motivated by a desire for territorial integrity and political influence, these nations launched a coordinated assault on multiple fronts. In the south, Egyptian forces crossed the Suez Canal and initiated a fierce offensive in the strategically significant Sinai Peninsula to regain control over this vital region. Simultaneously, Syrian troops launched a campaign in the north, targeting the Golan Heights, an area of immense military importance that had long been a point of contention, also for its significance to the water supply in that relatively dry region. The Yom Kippur War, or the October War as it was named by the Egyptian side, was not merely a regional conflict. It attracted significant attention and involvement from external powers, most notably the United States. Western countries, led by the U.S., extended extensive military support to Israel during the conflict. This support stemmed from a variety of factors, including geopolitical interests, Cold War dynamics, and historical alliances. Viewing Israel as a key ally in the region, the United States swiftly responded to Israel's plea for assistance. Through a massive airlift operation, known as Operation Nickel Brass, the U.S. supplied Israel with crucial military equipment, including aircraft, tanks, and ammunition. This military aid played a critical role in bolstering Israel's defense capabilities and turning the tide of the war in their favor. The support provided by Western countries to Israel during the Yom Kippur War highlighted the complex web of alliances and interests that shaped the conflict's dynamics. Furthermore, it set the stage for a sequence of events that would reverberate far beyond the battlefield, ultimately leading to the eruption of the oil crisis following the OPEC oil embargo. Now, you need to understand the severity of the situation in Israel that forced Western countries to intervene on such a massive scale. After the remarkable victory in the Six-Day War, just 6 years before, when tiny Israel defeated and humiliated 6 Arab countries in less than a week, Israel sank into a deep euphoria, mistakenly believing that no army in the world would dare to attack them. The Israeli government ignored the warning signs from its intelligence services and started the war in a catastrophic position, facing a real threat of extinction only 25 years after the establishment of the country. And here I have a small debt to you from my previous videos about Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady. As I mentioned then, Thatcher wasn't the first woman to become a country leader in the modern history of the Western world. She was only the second, following Golda Meir, who served as Israel's prime minister during this war. Golda will forever be remembered in Israel as a charismatic leader who has done amazing things for her people, but she forever carries the burden of the Yom Kippur War scandal, blamed for being smug and overly confident, disregarding the many red flags that were raised to her, indicating an imminent grand war.
Prime Minister, the Egyptians are sending troops to the Suez Canal, and the Syrians are doing the same in the Golan Heights. According to our guy in Cairo, a grand attack is only a matter of days.
You funny officer, there is not even one general in the Arab world who will have the guts to mess with us. We have IDF. the strongest army in the Middle East, or even in the whole world.
But Golda, I beg you. Our sources are 100% reliable. It might be the end of the Zionist project.
You cute little officer. Why won't you grab yourself a beer and stop being such a crying party pooper?
Shortly, all will realize that this officer was anything but a crying party pooper. Some even claim that there was a point when Golda, due to the catastrophic start of the war, was not far from pushing the red nuclear button as a last resort to save her nation. Back to the relation to the Iron Lady. While historically these two powerful ladies don't have a direct connection, I would like to offer my humble opinion on that. In some indirect way, Golda's arrogant dismissal of Israeli intelligence reports about the impending war eventually contributed to Thatcher's rise to power 6 years later in the UK. Think about that. Golda fails to prepare her country for a major war. Arab countries surprisingly launch an attack. Unprepared Israel lacks the necessary military equipment and ammunition to defend the country. Western countries must intervene and fill this gap in warfare supplies. Israel emerges victorious in the war. Arab nations, traditionally controlling the oil market due to their geographic locations, don't see this Western aid nicely. They declare an oil embargo on the West. Inflation, stagflation, high unemployment rate, or in short, not fun. The largest economic crisis in the UK since the Great Depression. And finally, Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, is getting elected as a response to the crisis. What do you think about my logic? I'm curious to know your thoughts on my perspective. Please share your comments, and let's engage in a fruitful discussion about this fascinating economic event from history. And one more thing, guys. Each video I upload took me around 60 hours of work. The only thing I wish is that my efforts won't go to waste. So please subscribe to the channel now. I promise that pressing this button below will take you less than 60 milliseconds. And if you could also share with friends that might enjoy Economic Rhapsody, I will be more than grateful. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. The Israeli victory, coupled with the extensive Western support, had far-reaching consequences, extending well beyond the borders of the Middle East. Arab nations, particularly those aligned with the Arab cause, were deeply aggrieved by the war's outcomes. They viewed Israel's success jointly with Western support as a significant blow to their aspirations for regional dominance and Palestinian self-determination. Driven by political motivations and a desire to exert pressure on the Western countries that supported Israel, OPEC made a landmark decision. In response to the perceived injustices of the October War, OPEC members implemented the first steps of an oil embargo during the war itself on October 17th and escalated the embargo right after the end of the war. They were targeting the US, Canada, Japan, and several European countries. The goal behind OPEC's oil embargo was doubled. Firstly, it aimed to exert political pressure on the countries perceived to have supported Israel during the war. By restricting oil exports to these nations, OPEC sought to demonstrate its economic influence and leverage its oil resources as a political weapon. The embargo was a means of signaling displeasure, seeking to influence policy decisions, and potentially shifting the balance of power in the region. Secondly, the embargo was also driven by economic considerations. Arab nations sought to capitalize on the rising global demand for oil and maximize their economic gains. By reducing the supply of oil, they aimed to drive up prices and increase their revenues significantly. So the embargo actually served as a means of both political protest and economic advantage. And my humble personal interpretation is pure opportunism. I mean, you don't really think that Saudi Arabia cared so much about Syria's territory claims in some hills on the Golan Heights, right? I guess you never even heard about this tiny region, which is more than 12 times smaller than New Jersey. Well, I guess they did care a little, but in my personal opinion, the thing is that the OPEC countries used the Western aid to Israel as an excuse of so-called Arab solidarity to actually execute their wishes of both weaken the West and gain more global power for themselves. They used their monopoly abilities to dramatically increase the world oil price. Sounds like a win-win to me. Let's go back in time 2 to 3 decades to understand how critical was OPEC's embargo. Since the beginning of the 20th century, and more intensely from the 50s, the world witnessed an exponential increase in oil consumption. Rapid industrialization, the growth of automobile culture, and expanding economies contributed to a surge in global demand for oil. This insatiable appetite for energy set the stage for the Western world's vulnerabilities of oil-dependent economies versus the dominant oil-producing nations in the Eastern world, which were increasingly gaining control over the oil market. Oh, and if you were asking yourself what OPEC is, it's a good time to clarify. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries was founded in 1960 by 5 oil-producing nations: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. In less than 2 years, Qatar, Indonesia, and Libya joined the organization as well. OPEC aimed to safeguard the interests of oil-producing countries and ensure stability in the oil market. Over the years, OPEC expanded its membership and became a powerful force in shaping global oil prices and supply. The decisions and actions of OPEC would play a pivotal role in the events that led to the oil crisis of 1973 to 74. Following the implementation of the oil embargo, Western countries faced immediate and severe consequences that rippled through their economies and societies. Fuel shortages quickly became a stark reality as oil imports from OPEC nations significantly declined, or in some cases, were completely halted. This shortage affected not only individual consumers but also critical industries and transportation systems. One of the most visible and crucial effects of the oil crisis was obviously the skyrocketing oil prices. OPEC's deliberate reduction in oil supply created a surge in demand and allowed the oil-producing nations to dictate higher prices. The price of oil quickly zoomed, reaching unprecedented levels. A moment of proportions. In the days before the OPEC embargo, 1 barrel of oil in the U.S. was traded for $2.90. 10 weeks later, on January 74, the same barrel was traded for $11.65. It is a price growth of 300% in less than 3 months. I'm writing these lines in July 2023, when a barrel is traded for $75. Now imagine what will be the inflation rate at the end of the year if by October we'll see similar price growth and 1 barrel will be traded for $300. You know what? Don't imagine, tell me in the comments here. I believe that we will all miss current inflation rates which we're struggling with these days. The sudden and substantial increase in oil prices inflicted severe economic pain on Western countries, contributing to inflation, stagnation, and rising unemployment rates. These adverse economic conditions, collectively known as stagflation, created immense challenges for policymakers and everyday citizens alike. Industries heavily reliant on oil, such as transportation, manufacturing, and agriculture, were hit particularly hard. The high cost of oil and fuel shortages disrupted supply chains, hampered production capabilities, and increased operational expenses. As a result, many industries experienced declines in productivity and profitability. Consumers also felt the impact of the crisis as the rising costs of goods and services reflected the increased expenses incurred by businesses due to higher energy prices. The scarcity and high cost of oil reverberated through daily life, affecting individuals' routines and choices. In response to fuel shortages and rising prices, governments implemented measures to conserve energy. Energy-saving campaigns encouraged people to reduce their consumption, resulting in practices such as carpooling, limited driving hours, and energy-efficient home practices. Additionally, individuals faced the challenge of managing their personal budgets amidst rising living costs, which required making difficult choices and prioritizing essential expenses. The impact of the oil crisis extended far beyond immediate economic challenges. It revealed vulnerabilities in Western economies heavily reliant on imported oil and underscored the need for greater energy independence and diversification. The crisis acted as a wake-up call, spurring Western countries to reassess their energy policies and strategies. Governments began investing in research and development of alternative energy sources, such as nuclear power, renewable energy, and conservation efforts. The pursuit of energy security and reduced dependence on oil became key priorities for many nations in the aftermath of the crisis. That's it for now. I invite you to subscribe to the channel to get notified once the second part of the 70s oil crisis is on air. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this combination of economics, together with some war history and its geopolitical implications. In the next video, we will explore the long-term consequences of the oil crisis, including energy policy changes and geopolitical shifts. Stay tuned to uncover the factors that led to the resolution of the crisis and the lasting impacts it had on the global energy landscape. And by the way, if you wondered about the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict, though no one sees an upcoming end, at least there was some good news on the Egyptian side. 6 years after the war, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin bravely signed a long-lasting peace treaty formulated in Camp David. Later, they were honored with the prestigious Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts in achieving peace. Egypt received the Sinai Peninsula back, including its oil reserves, and full control over the Suez Canal, which is their most vital economic asset, comprises around 10% of its GDP today. In return, Israel, despite giving up on 75% of its territory, earned a lasting peace that has probably saved thousands of lives over the past 43 years. Unfortunately, one life wasn't saved, as 2 years following the treaty, President Sadat was assassinated in Cairo by some Egyptian guy who did not fully appreciate the value of peace agreements. Sadat was honored with great distinction in Israel, his ex-bitter enemy, with streets and squares bearing his name. Sadly, his assassinator received the same recognition in none other than post-revolution Iran. And that takes us to the second oil crisis of 1979, triggered by the Iranian Revolution that paralyzed its oil production. Let me finish the second part of this crisis, and I promise to explore the next oil crisis of 1979 together with you shortly. Economic Rhapsody. Talk to you soon.